at one point I was like, dude, this is just like Nick and Dave therapy show. Like I had that thought, like that like I was like self-conscious about it for a minute. And I was like, no, this is really good. And we like went hard in the paint on the nerd stuff a minute ago, so we can like double down on this end,
I feel like we talked about, I love this this like, we just had a podcast, now we're going to talk about how great we did in it.
We're men, okay? That means a few things.
Men sometimes have strange motives for the things they do.
But we are still proud. For if a man loses pride in manhood, he is nothing.
I'm a man. I'm sensitive.
Confronted with their true selves, most men run away screaming.
Isn't this a strange conversation for men who aren't crazy?
You make me want to be a better man.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
Welcome back to the Better Men Film Club podcast, the podcast where we use the lens of film to dissect, explore, and challenge the messaging and social conditioning that men have received in the last century, both positive and problematic, all in the hopes to be better.
Yeah.
I'm Dave Gregory. I'm joined here, as always, by the incomparable Nick Flora.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. I saw a movie today that we're not going to talk about.
Oh,
but I can't stop thinking about it. You're going to see it soon, so we'll probably talk about it then. So the end. Moving on. Thanks for listening, guys. If you want to follow us on socials, it's I'm doing great. I'm really excited about this episode because it's a little bit of a left of center, but also it's very off-brand for the podcast, but on brand for us, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I'm also excited. Well, not excited for this, but it could turn into an exciting podcast because Nick is currently under a tornado watch in Nashville where he lives. But you're podcasting from the basement, so
I am.
You're safe,
it's true,
right? Okay.
And only between 8 and 9, which is when we were recording this. So we will get off of here and then it'll be over. So this is really exciting. We should have done a Twister episode. Do you want to just pivot to Twister?
Maybe that could be like our thing. Like we only record the podcast in states where there's tornado warnings during the tornado warning.
Yeah, this is going to be complicated, but worth it, I think. Worth it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm pumped today too. So here's the thing about Nick and I. If you know us, you know these things, and this is part of why I think we are. We joke a lot about being the same person, but you know, a lot of people connect on a lot of different things. You have your friend where you go like, oh, this person's into the same movies that I am, or is into movies to the extent that I am, or music, or this sport, or that sport, or whatever. And Nick and I overlap on every damn thing. But one of the things that I think is the rarest is comedy. We're both big comedy nerds.
And specifically stand-up comedy. Yeah,
stand-up comedy. So not just good point. That's always what I mean when I say comedy, but maybe I should be more specific. But yeah, and not just that. But I remember one of the first times we talked about, or we stumbled on that. You asked me like, "Oh, are you into comedy? Are you know?" And I said yes. We started talking about podcasts, but then you get into the specificity of the stand-ups. Like I have friends that they like Brian Regan or Jim Gaffigan, like all the greats, but like those guys,
the household names,
household names, exactly. But like, I mean, like comedy nerd. Like, I remember my first time going to New York City with my wife, Kate. The highlight of that trip wasn't even just going to the Comedy Cellar to see the show. The highlight of that trip was the hour and a half before the show. We went upstairs at Olive Tree Cafe, sat and had cheesecake, and I just stared at the back corner booth where Mike Birbiglia, Dave Attell, and I'm trying to think who else was sitting with them. Those are the two big names. Those are two, like, I idolize those guys. And they were just sitting there eating pasta or whatever.
Dudes.
Yeah, and my poor wife stared at me while I stared at them for an hour and a half. So, I mean, like, that level of love for this.
Yeah.
And so to find someone who matches me on that was like, I was so excited.
That was such a good day. There were so many exciting days in our burgeoning friendship, but the day that we both realized that, I think I referenced a stand-up and I was like, oh, by the way, that's so-and-so, which means so-and-so. And you were like, Nick. I know who that is. And you're like, oh, that's so exciting, you know? Do you remember, or was there a point, or was it always there? Was there like entry point into stand-up comedy for you, or was it one of those things where it was just kind of always there? Like Bill Cosby was just always in your life. Like that's the way it was for me. I just kind of always knew about stand-up comedy because of like Bill Cosby and Steve Martin and stuff.
I think a little bit of both, but I do remember like the earliest like comedy memory that I have is actually really funny and really specific. Me and my dad used to watch. My dad is a Mexican immigrant. Like he moved over here. I'm the only person in my family that was born in the States, and so when he was home, we would all speak Spanish. When he was gone, we would all speak English. But they were all born in Mexico, so the way me and him bonded, I remember he found this show on like Telemundo or something called Que Locos, and it was from the Comedy Store in LA. They started doing like a Spanish comedy night. I think that's where it was. I could be making that up, so fact check me, internet. But and it was all of these Latino comedians on a 100% Spanish station, but all the comedy was in English. But it was kind of like a little bit of both. Like they would do kind of Spanglish stuff and stuff like that. So I remember being like kindergarten, first grade, second, third grade, stuff like that, like really young age, and watching that with him on like it was like a Monday night or something like that. It would always come on, and we would sit there and just watch stand-up comedy. And now you see people like I remember Felipe Esparza broke on that. Like I remember seeing him there. I say broke. I don't know how good that was for them or anything. I've never met anyone else who's ever seen that showcase. But I see people out and about now where I'm like, oh yeah, from Que Locos, and it's like, yeah, I mean, kind of like that was like an open mic that someone just put on like 11 p.m. Telemundo programming. Like no one was watching it, but that was such a vivid memory for me. That was one of the first like stand-up memories I have.
Yeah, I remember like Bill Cosby being a thing, like I was saying a minute ago, like, and it was just, I remember like Bill Cosby himself being on repeat on like PBS or something. It must have been. And it was just like on Saturday nights, Sunday nights, they would just play it and stuff like that. And then somewhere like when I was like 13, I found at a thrift store, like a tape of Wild and Crazy Guy, the Steve Martin album. And then I became obsessed with it. And then I used to like literally go to school in 7th grade and repeat some of his bits at the table. And my friend, and it would kill in like, of course, this is like, you know, almost 20 years after that album was released. And then I was like, well, I got to find more material. And so I was just completely stealing bits and stuff and doing bits. But honestly, like I didn't, we talked about this IRL a few weeks ago, but like I didn't discriminate. Like I really got into Jeff Foxworthy. You know, You Might Be a Redneck, if a couple of his albums, because once I've, you know, 13, 14-year-olds are hard to buy for. So like once your parents or family find out you're into something, they just buy a bunch of stuff for you. They're Absolutely. Like, oh, quick, go to the store and get them all of these comedy tapes. So like my grandma got me a Jeff Foxworthy tape because she saw how much I liked this Steve Martin one. And then I kind of took a break from it for a while. I mean, the Adam Sandler one was a couple of his albums were huge. That's not really stand up. It's more like sketch. But I remember like getting into bands during the Napster era. Mm-hmm. And you could just download like individual tracks from like Mitch Hedberg, Brian Regan, Jim Gaffigan, all these guys. And like that was kind of my re-entry point back into stand-up. When the internet came around, you felt like you could find new stand-ups without going just to Walmart and seeing what was in the stand-up section, you know?
Totally. It's funny you mentioned those guys too, because those, another thing, I remember watching all that stuff. Bill Cosby himself, of course, we had that CD in both of our cars. So every single road trip we ever took, we would listen to Bill Cosby himself and a few others and stuff like that. My dad also listened to a lot of like Mexican stand-up comedians. Polo was one guy. I can't remember them all, but then I remember like coming into maybe middle school for me was around the age where I really started watching those myself. Comedy Central, back when it was a comedy station, just like MTV used to be a music channel. Comedy Central Presents, man, they were on fire. You mentioned Mitch Hedberg, 98, 99?
Seems like it.
Dude, you know what's crazy? Like that to me, the Comedy Central Presents Mitch Hedberg is like quintessential Mitch Hedberg. I know he died at a super young stage in his career, so there's not a lot of his content out there, but that's only 22 minutes long. 22 minutes, but it's just like I remember watching that and being like, even at that age in middle school, being like, oh, I immediately can tell this format and this thing that he's doing. Oh, this is going to be hacky. This is going to be whatever. And then the jokes start coming out and they're brilliant. And it was just like, holy crap, this is like 4 words, 5 words, 12 words, like just like 18 jokes a minute. It felt like just like he just hammers you with them. And he just for 22 minutes straight in that special, like I just couldn't breathe. I was just like so consistently laughing. And that Comedy Central Presents was huge for me. There were so many comedians I discovered there.
Comedy Central Presents, that's a good, I forgot all about that. Like there are specific Comedy Central Presents that I still to this day remember specific jokes from. The Nick Swartzen one, specifically the Dimitri Martin one, Mitch Hedberg. Like I remember specific jokes from that to this day, like 20 something years later. It'll pop into my head. And I think like for whatever reason, I think comedy is just, my brain is wired for humor. And so like, I just remember I take on information easier if it's through jokes. Like Saturday Night Live is one of my favorite shows of all time, but specifically Weekend Update. I got, when I was a teenager, I got the news through SNL. Like I knew who people were, and
Hollywood Minute.
Yes, I'm not even kidding. Like through people making fun of people on SNL, I just through the reference, I was like, oh, I think I kind of pieced it together. But like I remember specific jokes. I remember jokes better than I remember anything else. Like for whatever reason, like it sticks in my brain. And I think a lot of people are like, I think that's why stand-up comedy as a medium is so unique and interesting. And is such a fun, like date night activity, or it's like, hey, you want to go do this interesting thing. And it's not that just anybody can play music or going to a concert, but like we're about to talk about with stand-up specials, just crafting a special that like, it's like making a good mixtape. It's like, it really does like ebb and flow, and like the dynamics need to be a certain way, and like the through line through, or what themes are going to be in it. Like the really good ones are just, they blow my mind. I don't know how they're written. I don't know how they do it.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, like the whole blow your mind thing, like that's the thing for me. Like you and I are both creatives. We talk about that a lot. We've written songs, we've made records. I'm a videographer, producer. I've done stuff on the video and stuff. Like I feel like I know there are obviously people in both of those other arenas where I go like, well, I can't really do what those people do, but I'm trying to, right? When it comes to stand-up comedy, it's one of those things where I go like I would much rather be a successful stand-up comic than any of those other things. But I won't ever even attempt it, because still to me, when I watch like an incredible stand-up special or a live show, I've seen a ton of my favorite comedians live. It's still a magic trick to me. I still don't get how they're doing it. You watch someone hold a room, and it doesn't even matter to me, honestly, whether it's, I'm not sure which one I'm more impressed with, whether it's a room of 50 people or a stadium of 50,000 or a theater with 2,000. The fact that someone just walked out on stage and picked up a microphone. And like, it's more so, it's different than like when I go see a musician, even a solo musician, come out here and play the songs. We've come for the music that we fell in love with, where like I don't go see the stand-up comedians that I love for their jokes. I go see them to see them on stage, and I'm hoping they'll make me laugh, but I'm here to see this person tonight. And that's just so impressive to me. I have like such a reverence for it,
Well, you hear all over and over again, this is the golden era for stand-up comics because of podcasts specifically, because back in the day, you might see a comedian do a panel on a talk show or go on SNL as themselves, the monologue or whatever. But now we have hours upon hours upon hours, for better or for worse, depending on how you like the comedian, of just hearing a comedian's inner thoughts, how they work out bits, people who are funny just in regular speak, and people who kind of aren't, and for whatever it is, for better or for worse, I love it. It's helped me get into a lot of new stand-ups that I don't think I normally would have heard about. But I think there is a certain thing a recurring thing that I hear, and I've been lucky enough I'm friendly with a couple different stand-up comedians, and there's a recurring theme, which is stand-up comedians want to be rock stars or musicians, and musicians want to be stand-up comedians. Like there is a mutual admiration, because we don't understand how the other one does the thing that the other one does. And I have that, and I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not near. I've never done stand-up. I've done storytelling shows, and part of my show, I have crafted my sets of music to have stories in the middle of them. And I've done a lot of house shows that are kind of stories and songs and that kind of thing. And so a little bit more on like the Mike Birbiglia side of telling an entire story. But I get laughs and stuff, and I'm not going to be false modest and say I'm not funny. I think I am funny, but like there is, I think it's all about the context. Like people don't expect the musician to be funny. So when he's a little bit funny, people will laugh harder in the same way that like if a comedian goes up and isn't funny for 90 seconds, the crowd starts getting a little bit antsy.
Right. There's something to that. Like, hey, I came here to make me laugh. Like, and you hear a lot of stand-up comics say like, gosh, who was it I was listening to recently? Oh, you know who it was Reese Darby. I was listening to him on Working It Out with Mike Birbiglia. That's one of our favorite podcasts. And he said like he did a show. He is a very performative comedian. He doesn't tell jokes. Yeah. He performs, kind of like funny. Acts things out and stuff. Oh, he's incredible. And that episode, did you listen to his episode?
I haven't heard it yet. No.
It's brilliant. It's so funny. But he said, he was like, yeah, one of my biggest fears is being on stage at a show and someone yelling, tell us a joke. And it's like, but that speaks, I think, somewhat to, and there's some comedians who like a Mitch Hedberg could go like, boom, and like smack you in the face with one. Reese Darby, no less a comedian, but like he has a whole other vibe. But it does speak to the mentality of the crowd when they show up to those shows where it's like, hey, make me laugh, like dance, monkey, you know? Yeah. And there is something to that, like you're like you said, as a musician, you're on stage, you make a quick little aside, like wisecrack or something, just like you would at the dinner table. It's much easier to entertain your friends. I think that's why you see so many people who go like, well, yeah, no, I'm funny. I could do stand up. Like I'm the funniest person in my friend group. And it's like, yeah, get on that stage, dude.
Okay. Do it.
Go for it.
I can't remember who says it all the time. I don't remember. I'm blanking. Somebody I've heard on a few different podcasts say like, I'm for it. Like get up there and try it because you'll see how hard it is. It might be Pete or Camille or somebody. They're like, okay, go for it. Like I think everybody should try stand up so you can see that it is so incredibly difficult. Because you can be, and I've been to stand-up shows where somebody kills for 75% of it. Somewhere around the 44-minute mark, they have a couple clunkers and the crowd will just turn on them. It's crazy. And I've never, that's one thing where I feel like I'd rather just do music because it's so much safer. If I bomb a joke, I can just go into a song. It's not a big deal. And nobody's expecting me to be funny. So it's just such a tightrope, like high wire act. And I'm always interested to see what people are doing in new and different ways. And that's one reason why, we'll get into it, but like Jerrod Carmichael's Rothaniel was so, I just couldn't look away because he has several moments where he's not making jokes and the crowd follows him there. And that is so rare. And we'll get into it, but that's one reason why I think it's so incredibly special. Hey guys, Nick Flora here. Quick interruption to tell you about the Betterman Film Club. Not this podcast, but the thing that the podcast is an offshoot of. Betterman Film Club is an actual virtual meetup group that we started and meets via Zoom twice a month to discuss a different movie each month as we unpack the themes, and it gives its members a chance to basically do what we do here on the podcast, which is talk about the movie, talk about the messaging, the themes, and our lives through the lens of whatever that month's movie is. At $9 a month, you get access to both meetups twice a month, access to a private Discord server and Facebook group where you can keep the conversation going and you can get to know your fellow film club members on a daily basis. Plus some Betterman Film Club swag. You can join today at bettermanfilmclub.com, and guess what? For the month of April 2022, it's free to join. Just go to bettermanfilmclub.com and sign up for the email list, and you'll get updates on when we are meeting and other good-to-know info. So for April 2022, we are watching and discussing the movie I Love You Man, starring Paul Rudd and Jason Segel, and diving into the topic of adult friendships and what makes them so complex and honestly hard to find. So come join us at bettermanfilmclub.com and sign up for a free month in April of 2022. And hey, if you dig it, come join us for more meetups and movies for only $9 a month. Now back to the show. But like, I want to go through a couple of if you are new to stand-up comedy or if you're a fan, and if you're a Fairweather fan or if you're an actual fan, doesn't matter. We're going to highlight a few of ours and kind of talk a minute or two on why we like it so much. From our favorite like stand-up specials throughout the years, and then we're going to jump into and talk about Jerrod Carmichael's Rothaniel. So do you want to start us off? What's a couple that like grabbed you and why?
I actually spent a lot of time thinking about this today. And really, I think I'm 95% sure I've narrowed it down to like my app, like a solid, strong top 5 here.
All right, Rock Gordon.
I'm listing them out in chronological order because I didn't want to say like this is from 5 to 1 of what's the best. But the first one on my list, and it's actually one of the first ones I remember, like a friend gave me this DVD and was like, "Hey, go home and just keep it low, sit close to the TV, don't let your mom hear this, and just watch this." And it was Eddie Izzard's Dressed to Kill. He does this live in San Francisco, I believe, 1999, and it's unbelievable. So Eddie Izzard, if you're not familiar with him, he's I don't know how he identifies, and so just forgive me here. I want to be as sensitive as possible, but he's I think transvestite is what he prefers, but so he cross dresses on stage oftentimes. And so he's in full drag. I don't know if he considers it that. Again, forgive me. He's in full drag on stage in San Francisco, 1999, and the special is unreal because, again, I saw this in probably middle school, and he has like a 20-minute set of his stand-up special that is in French, like completely in French, not like Spanglish, like a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of, like French. That's all he speaks. And I understood enough to die laughing the entire time he's doing it. And you're like, dude, this is brilliant. He's a comedian from the UK. But that to me, it's to this day is unlike anything I've ever seen. That's one of my faves.
Oh my gosh. I've never seen it. I'm been aware of Eddie Izzard, but he's one of those guys I've never really like jumped into his special.
That's really the only one of his that I've seen, but man, it's incredible. What about you?
I'm trying to think in chronological order. I mean,
you can go through them in whatever order. Yeah, I
know, but I was trying to think what was one of the earliest ones. I honestly like Patton Oswalt's Werewolves and Lollipops, which I'm going to reference here in a little bit again, because I think it has a very specific place and through line to actually, I'll just talk about it now. So it's from 2006. I think it's one of his first ones. There was a short-lived Comedy Central docuseries called The Comedians of Comedy.
It's one of the first things you and I really nerded out about.
So.
No one else talks to me about that. Yes.
I think it's all on YouTube now, but I also went on BitTorrent and grabbed that because I was like, this is going to be a thing that I'm never going to see again. It's not going to be on streaming. And so far I'm right. Like there's a DVD out, but it's not it's like a stand-up show. It's not like the show, the actual TV show. And it's Zach Galifianakis, Patton Oswalt, Maria Bamford, and Brian Posehn, who are all friends and are all 4 of the funniest people on the planet, in my opinion. Maria Bamford is just a truly special, unique creature. And Zach Galifianakis, who's a huge star now, at the time was not. But one of my favorite stand-ups too. I throw Live from the Purple Onion in there probably for one of my favorites. But Patton Oswalt put out an album in 2006 called Werewolves and Lollipops. And it's one of his his first one is called Feeling Kind of Patton, and then this one and it's good, but it's loose. You can tell that he's like almost figured out his persona, and this one he really hits. And there's a moment in it that I thought about immediately when I watched Rothaniel, which is there's a moment in it where, and this goes back to like the comedians not being able to be serious and or being earnest, like. Audiences get nervous, and comedy clubs just pump them with booze and like chicken wings, and then they're just amped. And so he's joke. I mean, he is just slaying every bit after bit. It's just that comedy special is near perfect, if not completely perfect in my mind. But there was a point at the end where he's telling a story about a hookup that he had with this woman. And he was supposed to be a one-night stand, and then the condom broke, and they go to the pharmacy at like 9 a.m. on a Sunday.
So now we're walking across the parking lot, and out of nowhere, we both have this weird, like vulnerable moment of regret. Where she said, look, I just met you and you seem really nice. We got to go do the adult responsible thing, but I could actually see having a kid with you. I know that's a stupid thing to say, but I'm feeling a twinge of regret. I just wanted to let you know that I'm feeling it. And I was like, wow, that's really awesome that you're saying that, because I too, I never thought I'd feel this way, but I could so see having a kid with you. You're beautiful and really original, and I'm feeling some regret. We got to go do the adult thing, but I'm glad that we can both admit this to each other. And it was this really like vulnerable moment of humanity, And then okay. I love the guy who's terrified at any kind of silence, like, he better say pussy sooner. Ah! Ah! Fuck me for building a moment. I'd hate to see you at a funeral or a wedding or something, you know? You skinhead! Oh shit, I'm sorry, man. It was like 20 seconds of quiet. I thought I was gonna shit my pants. I got real scared. What a dumb douchebag. There's a whole fucking turn. Honestly, it gets really quiet and then boom, it gets loud again. That's how it's like a Pixie song, kind of. You know, like that was what I was going for, but you were just like, I can't take it! I'm gonna be a douchebag forever! I'm being burned onto a CD for eternity being a douchebag!
It's one of the things that I love so much about a couple of the specials that I think led up to Rothaniel that did this really well. Nanette by Hannah Gadsby comes to mind, where audiences have become way more savvy and they're willing to kind of sit and go wherever the comedian or the performer takes them. And man, it just in 15, 16 years time, like just seeing that. But that whole special is incredible. I think he probably uses some R words and some stuff language we don't really use anymore. But apart from that, you know, Patton is an incredibly smart writer and an incredibly sensitive to cultural change guy. Like I don't hold anything like that against him. It was just the way it was back then.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, that's one of mine.
No, that's a great one. It almost I reevaluated my 5 when you brought that one up, but it's not on there, so I feel good about it. But it's yeah, no, it's interesting. So that actually helps me a little bit because I've got 5 here, but we can get through them fairly quickly because the other one I had on there was Mitch Hedberg, Comedy Central Presents. We've already kind of talked about him, but unbelievable guy. Look that up. It's literally, you can find that on YouTube as well, the full thing. The third one on my list was Zach Galifianakis live at the Purple Onion from 2006, and I had a whole thing I was going to launch into the comedians of comedy and all that kind of stuff. So I love that you brought that up. That was perfect. The other one, I guess, just again chronologically, these are actually setting up perfect into Rothaniel, is Mike Birbiglia, My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, in 2013. That was the first time that I understood what you were just talking about. That comedian that Mike Birbiglia, like he's the one that, you know, I know. Like
I know.
Yeah.
I'm in the future also.
Yeah. There's a guy on TikTok that does a really good thing where he was like, I think like if you say anything like Mike Birbiglia, it just sounds profound. And he just goes a thing where he's like, I'm going to the grocery store now, and like it's just like
I know.
But man, that special, like he was one, and I guess the first time he really did it was Sleepwalk with Me. He had a whole the kind of like the film he made around it, the stand-up special, all that stuff. But My Girlfriend's Boyfriend was the first one. I remember trying to communicate it to Kate later, my wife, about like, you don't understand like how brilliant this, like it wasn't a one-man show. Honorable mention, John Leguizamo does incredible one-man shows like on and off Broadway, but they're like Broadway productions with like moving set pieces. And I think that Mike is kind of grown into some stuff like that from what I've seen in some of his other ones. I know his new one, what is it, The Old Man in the Pool, like super excited about that. Like, but like, this is like the vein he's found now where it's like, hey, I'm going to tell you my entire show is one long story. Not like a storytelling comic where, I'm going to tell you some stories tonight, but it's like, no, I'm going to essentially like read a novel out loud to you tonight is what it feels like almost. But like, just like a band, even more so, or like a musician and an artist, there's such a musicality to like like you're talking about, like you get really quiet and he just draws you in and then they hit you with something, or that, you know, it's unbelievable. That special is huge for me.
He's such a brilliant storyteller, and it's really fun to go back and listen. The first thing I heard from him was an album called Two Drink Mike, which is way more jokey joke stand up, like club stand up. And then he did My Secret. He somewhere My Secret Public Journal Live was from 2007 was the one where I really was like, oh, this guy might be an all time favorite of mine, and it's because he just but in that between time, he started going on This American Life and becoming friends with Ira Glass and really started doing more storyteller shows. And now that's all he does. Like it's kind of insane, dude. Like My Secret Public Journal is one of my favorites of his. And then after that, he did Sleepwalk with Me, which is brilliant. He's done books and movies and so many things like that. And then My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, Thank God for Jokes, is amazing. I got to see it live. I got to see it here in Nashville, and he unpacks religion through like his relationship with religion and God through his love for jokes. And like it's the only time at a stand-up show I've gotten like misty eyed while also like laughing my ass off. Like and then his one, the new one about becoming a dad, which is on Netflix now, was literally on Broadway, and it's brilliant. It's just freaking amazing. There's just so many good ones. And the more we talk, I'm like, oh my God. But Tig Notaro's Live, I guess it's Live, that came out when she literally got a medical diagnosis where she thought she was going to die and like cancer diagnosis. And she did, the day she got that diagnosis, she went on stage and just at Largo and just did this impromptu thing. And the crowd doesn't know what to do.
She didn't know.
Just
she
lost
didn't have
her
that
mom.
Planned, right? Like, I mean, she didn't have time to write anything.
Nope. She just went out and just started talking, but because she's such a seasoned pro, she's one of my favorites.
She's incredible.
Like, she's so funny. The way she talks normally is funny and very deadpan, very like you kind of want to lean in because she's kind of speaking just so plainly. She has an incredible, one of my favorite bits of all time is the Taylor Dane bit she does on This American Life, where she talks about, she keeps running into 80s power ballad icon Taylor Dane.
I haven't heard this.
And oh my God, it's incredible. I'll send it to you. It's one of those things where like, with stand-up specifically, I want to like sit in a room with you and play it for you and like laugh along 100%. With you, you know. But Tig Notaro is an incredibly prolific writer and specific writer, but just her going out very raw like that and just being like, I'm going to talk to the crowd. I'm going to process this in real time with you. This medical diagnosis. I don't know how this is going to end, you know. And a lot of like comedy is like Mike Birbiglia saying like, okay, like I'm telling you a story, but like I'm here now and I've learned a lesson. So follow me. And there's kind of a safety built in, but Tig, it's just like, we don't know how this is going to end. This could be the last comedy special I do. And there's something about that just, that's why I think stand-up comedy, live comedy feels alive more than music does sometimes, because the unrehearsed stuff is what kind of breathes life back in the room where you're like, you like take a big breath where you're, and you know, improv does that where you're like, oh, everybody in the room knows that moment only happened here and it's only going to happen once.
Well, and like live music can be different, but it isn't always. You sometimes, you know, I've seen U2 twice. They're one of my favorite bands. Like the last show I went to, I was like, yeah, they kind of played the hits and it was fun to see them there. But like, I almost left disappointed that night because I was like, I didn't feel like there was anything that I could take away from tonight to say only me and the other people in that place tonight share that. And I feel like you get that every time in stand-up comedy. Every single time you're going to walk away knowing like, yeah, they have bits, they've got a set, they've got stuff they're working through, right? But it's going to be a little bit different every single time. You're going to go, only the people who saw this set will ever know this set, because there's just no two sets are identical, you know?
I love that stuff. Did you have other ones you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, I guess two. So really one was more honorable mention because it's not really a stand-up special, but you and I both love Burbonum's Inside. It came out in 2021. Unbelievable. And he also directed Rothaniel. I didn't know that until you told me, which is huge.
Yeah.
But I could see a lot of it afterwards because we'll talk about it, but it is very beautifully shot.
It is.
So shout out. If you haven't seen Inside, if you suffer from anxiety and mental health, know that going into that, that like it can be kind of tough to watch. I saw it in 2021. I was still not in the best place just after what 2020 had been, and I remember it feeling like I loved it. It's incredible, but I remember there being moments where I was like, this is almost too close to the cut for me at the moment. So just know that going into it. But I mean, also know like, golly, what a word. It's really not a stand-up special. Beautiful. It's like a multimedia, whatever, incredible special. But the last stand-up special I wanted to highlight was Dave Chappelle's The Bird Revelation, which came out in 2017. And I think that's really interesting because this one gets overlooked. Like, Dave went through, when he came back, the first time he came back, y'all, like, this was a big deal. Dave Chappelle left for what, 11 years? Longer than that?
Yeah.
Like, he literally quit and left the world, it seems like. After the whole Dave Chappelle thing, he went to Africa, and then I just didn't hear from him forever. So I don't know what he was doing. But then he came out of nowhere with these Netflix specials and released them 2 at a time. And so this one that came out, it was called, and I hated this, but it was called Equanimity and the Bird Revelation. And it was 2 different sets. And it just kind of gets referred to as equanimity in the Bird Revelation. And the Bird Revelation it was the shorter set in the smaller club. He sits on a stool the entire time. Everything about Rothaniel reminds me about the Bird Revelation in so many ways. Not the story that's being told, not the experience that's being shared, but the way that it's shot. It's very intimate, a lot of really close up. For most of the set, he's talking very quietly. And for most of the set, he's not telling jokes. He is being funny at moments about very traumatic and difficult and serious topics, and it just leaves. When it ended, it just left me with this feeling of like, oh my god, like he literally he tells his story of how and why he walked away from Hollywood, and he does it in a really poignant way where you can tell, like, man, this guy has been writing this in his head for a decade and a half. And so but it was interesting. I didn't even do that on purpose, but while sitting here while you were talking, I was looking at the last one on my list going like, man, if that is not a predecessor to Rothaniel, or if Rothaniel didn't benefit from, Dave putting that out in the ether, then it's just they're so closely related.
There's a couple leading up to that I wanted to talk about leading up to Rothaniel too, like watching that, and I'm like, how did we get here? Like I talked about Nanette, which is brilliant, but it's more, it feels like more of a one person show than a stand up special. But there's a couple storytelling shows that kind of lead up to it that, in my mind. But I can't talk about stand-up. My number one favorite stand-up of all time is John Mulaney as far as writing goes.
Kid Gorgeous or New Kid in Town?
My favorite is Comeback Kid. But I adore all of his albums, all of his specials. They all kind of like run together for me, like in a great way. It's just like, I listen to it. It's just like with the Killers. Like if I can't listen to one song off Battleborn. I have to listen to all of Battleborn. So, but that, and John Mulaney's getting a lot of like, people know who John Mulaney is now, but after a decade of
he wasn't always dating Olivia Munn like that. He was just one of the guys for a minute.
Yeah, I knew him as like the guy who was on Best Week Ever, like in 2007 with Pete Holmes and Nick Kroll and like a lot of those guys, Michael Ian Black, who also is a great stand-up comedian. And then another one that I want to talk about, which doesn't get enough heat, which I wish more people would listen to, Paul F. Tompkins, who's one of my favorite stand-up comedians of all time. He is a total comics comic, just funny in his bones, impossible. He can do a serious podcast episode where he just talks about his family or whatever, because he's gone through some trauma, but he's just funny. He's just funny the way he talks. But he has a fan freaking tastic comedy special called Laboring Under Delusions, and it's a bunch of stories about different jobs he's had, everything from a video store he worked at in high school all the way to one scene that he was in There Will Be Blood, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, where he acted, his scene partner was Daniel Day-Lewis. And then a time where he was filming Best Week Ever and with Weird Al Yankovic and a bunch of people. He's such a good storyteller. So Laboring Under Delusions from 2012. And then I just keep thinking of other ones. But one I wanted to highlight, Dave, I don't know if we've talked about this, but Neil Brennan's Three Mics.
Yes, absolutely.
This is the one that I feel like is the precursor to the Rothaniels of the world, because Neil Brennan, who was, speaking of Dave Chappelle's writing partner on Chappelle's show, brilliant. He's been in stand-up and comedy world since he was like 18. His older brother's a stand-up. He's been in the mix. He has maybe the most respect out of any stand-up, any working comedian today. Everybody just loves and adores him. This special Three Mics is, I've seen it like 4 or 5 times. It's just wholly unique, where he literally sets up 3 microphones on the stage, and one of them is for like short jokes, like tweets, like funny jokes.
Mitch Hedberg.
One of them, Mitch Hedberg style, like one-liners, and then he'll move to the middle mic and he'll do kind of classic stand-up, and it's killer. And then the third mic is for a story, like a vulnerable story. There's no jokes in it. He just wants to talk about some shit that's on his mind, and he opens up about his mental health issues. He opens up about his crime, like talking about not being afraid to be the villain, talks about being a star fucker, talks about being like only dating. He isn't married. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He only will jump from person to person to person, only date famous people. He's like obsessed with the high of dating a famous person. He unpacks his shit with his dad, which didn't end well. But he has the safety net of always, if he gets too vulnerable, going back to that first mic and telling a joke. And for the audience, it's a relief.
Yeah.
It's like it pops this bubble. It is really, really beautiful. And I think Rothaniel does that in way more of a free form kind of jazz kind of way, which is perfect because we'll talk about it here in a second. But it was filmed at the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York. So, and a lot of it, you mentioned it yesterday when we were talking, it feels like a jazz singer up there. I'm trying to think, is there something
what
else
else?
I wanted to mention?
Before you mention another one, what's crazy about that is that, like, again, the way I listed mine out, I just went chronological. Yeah. And while you were talking, I happened to be like, dang, the Bird Revelation absolutely set up the Rothaniels of the world. And then you bring up Three Mics, and both of those came out in 2017. Like,
oh, wow. Okay.
Former writing partners, both released a special 2017. 100%. I look at those two. That was a big year. Like, that was a freaking big year.
Neil Brennan, if you Three Mics is on Netflix. It's a Netflix special, so it's on there. If you want to go watch that, but also Dave, also on Netflix, Dave Chappelle has he gets the Mark Twain Award, and
incredible.
It's beautiful, but Neil Brennan kills it. Like a bunch of comedians come up there and do stand up and do bits and talk about Dave Chappelle, but like Neil Brennan gets up there and absolutely slays because it's like his best bud. Like it's his old writing partner. He drags him a little bit. Like it's really, really, he's so smart.
We need a button on this podcast that we can just push and so that we don't have to keep saying we're the same person. I genuinely love this because what's funny, again, when I made my list earlier, two things that I wasn't going to say earlier, but I almost put Kid Gorgeous on there because there you go. I almost put Kid Gorgeous on there because it should be on everyone's list because John Mulaney is one of the best stand-up comedians I've ever heard. Writer. His writing is incredible, and those specials, I love them all. Kid Gorgeous was one of my favorites. So, and then I left it off because I was like, you know what? No, it's not one of my favorites. It's incredible, but I'm putting it on the list because I want people to know that I recognize his greatness. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so for you to bring that up, that was great. And then I totally lost my train of thought. What did you literally? Oh, the Mark Twain thing. I started thinking about, I was like, honestly, I don't think I could leave Chappelle off of my list. And then I was debating, could I put the Mark Twain Award episode on there as a stand-up special? Because it's more beautiful than anything, but it's also
it's
hilarious.
Really cool.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I love Pete Holmes as well. I want to throw him in the mix as well.
I'm just kidding. I love Pete Holmes. What if we did that? That'd be
he's such a unique voice too. Like, people love him or hate him. He's great. I feel like he's such a unique. He's not afraid to go big, and I really appreciate that because a lot of the things he does would make me cringe, but he just leans into it so hard that you're like, you kind of impressed with it.
Been trying to be very honest because my whole life was shrouded in secrets, and figured the only route I haven't tried was the truth. So I'm saying everything. Here's everything. Feel okay. Very thankful for tonight.
Here, how about this? This is the perfect segue back into this. This is one of the most aesthetically pleasing specials I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Ever. It's beautifully shot. Simply, but like so beautifully shot.
There is something really compelling. I know I keep using that word, but like there in its simplicity, there is something like you can't, and I think with a comedy special, the whole goal is not be able to take your eyes off the comedian. And he does that in his directing, and then whoever did the editing and the coloring and everything, like they just nailed it. Cause I watched it a couple of times now, and it is so, you can't take your eyes off the screen. You can't take your eyes off Jerrod, especially in a special that is this raw and that is this vulnerable and that is this honest. You need no distractions. You need something that is visually compelling, visually drawing you in, and he nails it. Like, and he also like fucking Bo Burnham, man. He directed another stand-up special that I adore, Chris Rock's Tambourine. He directed that,
so good.
Which when Chris Rock is like, "Hey, please come direct my special,"
I think that's Chris Rock's best special.
It's incredible, and this is also, I think, leading up to our Rothaniel. Like everybody. in the comedy community sees what everybody's doing, and then it's like, oh, is that allowed now? Okay, what's my version of that? For the most part, and which musicians do that too. But Tambourine is incredible because 3/4 or maybe even halfway through, it's a Chris Rock special. It's a straight up classic, bigger and blacker Chris Rock Bringing the Pain special, and then it clicks in where he's just talking as himself, and he talks about his family and his divorce and him having an affair and like owning up to all of it. And it's incredible. It's such a beautiful moment of vulnerability for Chris Rock, and a thing we've never really seen before from him. So like, and Bo Burnham had a huge hand in that. And I'm like, man, this kid who started up as a YouTuber before that was even a thing,
like literally one of the first YouTubers.
One of the first YouTubers is now like one of the voices of his generation. And I don't even say that in any kind of winky way. Like he should be. He's an incredible voice and an incredible artist. And him and Jerrod apparently go way back, because I was reading, because he also directed an earlier Jerrod Carmichael special as well. So they've worked together a few different times.
Was it 8 or something like that?
8, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Jerrod Carmichael is a 35-year-old stand-up from North Carolina. He kind of came into prominence. He had one of his first stand-up specials was filmed at the Comedy Store. It's called Love at the Store in 2014. It was directed by Spike Lee. So if that's not coming out of the gates with big guns swinging, and he always just seemed like the guy that he's a New York comic, Jerrod is, but he also like, it's almost like everybody in the business knew that he was going to be like the next big thing or something like that. He keeps getting all these opportunities early-ish in his career. And he had a NBC sitcom for a while.
It was really good.
Called The Carmichael Show.
Carmichael Show was great, man. Lil Ray was on that. Like, it was funny.
Or Lil Rel.
Lil Rel.
He's related to Lil Ray. They're friends.
Yeah. Lil Ray just goes by Ray now. He dropped a little like Bow Wow.
But right. But what's amazing about, and Jerrod popped up. He's done acting. He's popped up in like Neighbors and like a Transformers movie, I think. But he's never really kind of found his footing. It didn't seem like, as far as like household names go in comedy. But it's increasingly harder and harder and harder to be a household name in comedy.
But yeah, I remember there being a lot of heat around Jerrod when he came out in general. And just everyone being like, this guy's the next big thing. This guy's the next big thing. And I'm not really sure. I didn't do my research on this, so I don't know why the Carmichael Show ended, if it was canceled, if he walked away from it, if it was COVID. I would assume it was related to COVID.
I don't know either. It was 2015 to 2017, so it's before COVID hit. I thought it was a COVID cancellation too.
But he kind of just he kind of disappeared for a while, in my mind at least, right? Like just kind of object impermanence. I stopped seeing him, so I forgot about him. And but it was interesting for me. I heard that he had a new special coming out, and I was like, oh, that guy, good, like, way to go. I always liked that show a lot. Like, I remember hearing he was going to be good. I'm glad he's still doing it. And then he found out that he was hosting SNL, and I was like, well, that's a big deal. Like, this guy hasn't, again, in Dave's mind, I'm like, he hasn't done anything for a while, and he just comes out and gets to host SNL. Like, what's happening? And I think a lot of it was it was immediately in the news. This is a little bit of a spoiler for like the actual special, but I mean, like, the headline of everywhere when you look at Rothaniel and Jerrod Carmichael is he comes out as gay in this special pretty early on into the special. And I before I even saw the special, I watched him host SNL, and he talked about it there, came out and like explained all of that stuff. And so that also, I could 100% be just kind of projecting my own thoughts on that, but you go, I haven't seen this guy in a while. And then he comes out and tells you the story of kind of like what's been going down the last, however many years in his family. I mean, throughout his whole life, but especially like the last few years, how certain things have played out. And you're like, oh, that explains a lot. Because he was straight on the Carmichael Show. He had a girlfriend on the Carmichael Show. He was presenting not just to his family, but to like the world, like one persona, and then had to completely come out and say like to some effect, like, hey, I feel like I've been lying to y'all,
I was really out here lying, though. There's a thing. I came out too late, like a little too late. I was like 30. That It Gets Better shit is for the kids. Like, that's not for an adult man figuring himself out. Like, they don't want that. Nobody wants that shit. All my friends felt like I was just duplicitous. Like, I was just lying to them. They didn't know who I was. They all reacted like Sally Field and Mrs. Doubtfire. They were like, the whole time? Like, they were very... mad about that shit. It cleared up my relationship with all my black homegirls. My friend Ashley told me before I came out, she could sense it. She was like, please just tell me you're gay so this all makes sense. I guess it's like only so many times you can like FaceTime a woman to see if your outfit looks okay. But they start having some questions, and they were the toughest. I'll say, like, black women were the toughest people to come out to, but also the most supportive. I'm very, very thankful for all of the black ladies in my life, you know, who supported me through that, through all of it. They're not homophobic at all. They're racist as a motherfucker. They don't like that I had a white boyfriend. Oh my! See? You see what I'm saying? You see that?
And the special is beautiful. It opens up on a snowy New York street, and you see him come into the room, and the audience is there. It's at the Blue Note, a jazz club in New York City. Small crowd. It looks like maybe like 75 people total, like can fit in there. It feels small. And he comes in. He just kind of walks in through the back, like hugs somebody at the coat check, and then just walks up on stage and has a seat. It is so unassuming and beautiful.
So great.
But even in that moment, like, you can't keep your eyes off him. There's something about like, oh, he's here. And there's even a guy in the background who kind of like sees him through the darkness of the crowd. You can tell him, like, takes notice and like hits his friend and is like, hey, look, and gets up there. And then the opening line is, let's get comfortable. I want this to feel like family. If the only way this works is if this feels like family. And then, you know, we're not going to go into everything, but he talks about some things that I feel like are important for us to talk about in here, which is he launches into the idea of secrets, specifically family secrets. And it's funny, it's poignant, it's honest, and it's a little hard to watch, but also you can't look away. In moments like this whole thing, you know, he really goes into his finding out that his family was like a side family, or his grandparents, I think, maybe. He was saying, I think one of the first jokes is there's no way to say that, you know, no easy way to say that your grandma was a side piece, but, you know, this is the way it was, and talks about that. And like, specifically like the secrets that plague the men in his family. And, not to go into, I'm not going to offer up anything. I have some personal resonance with that. And I know you do too, Dave. And that part specifically in his relationship with his mom and being the protector of his mom, while also having a really complicated relationship with his mom through that whole thing, through his dad lying, being a philanderer, having secret families, all this kind of stuff. And that was the part that was like, well, no matter what he does, I like forgot about that he was going to come out at some point, because I knew that. Because that was so like resonant with me. I don't know. How did you take that first chunk?
It was wild, man. Yeah, that first chunk, it really was. It was wild because, like, I remember. Yeah, like I definitely that my story resonates with that too, and it's tough for me. I remember thinking about it in the car on the drive home yesterday, thinking like, how am I going to talk about some of this stuff, because I want to, but people are still alive, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say everyone's stuff, but at the same time, I just go like, yeah, he comes out and immediately has to wrestle with decisions his father has made that have hurt him and have hurt his family, and the parts about that he's angry about, the parts of that he's ashamed about, the parts of that he feels complicit in. And it's interesting. I mentioned on the last episode, like, Kate and I have been married for 11 years. So like, we got married young. I was 24, and I remember that year, like on a Father's Day, saying something out loud to her for the first time. And it's just the only reason that was significant, that I was married and that all that stuff, is because I was now saying things to someone out loud that I would have a year ago just thought to myself, because I didn't have anyone that was around me 24/7. So I remember just saying something out loud about my father and just losing it. Like, it was an opinion I had, and it just like, it wasn't new to me. I had known this forever. I had thought and felt this way forever, but it was my first time saying it out loud and like doing that, and just like I literally just had a breakdown. Like I just lost everything. And so it was really powerful to see the way that this starts out, because I go like, I know a lot of work has been done up to this point for him to sit here, and it immediately, anybody who has any kind of trauma that resonates with anything that he's talking about here, experience that resonates with this, knows that, which is everybody for the most part, because we all have traumas, right? Like that's not a who does and who doesn't. We all have
it's
that.
universal.
So, there was that, and then also like it was very like triggering's the wrong word and such an overused kind of meaningless word now, but like there was something very like visceral about it, in an almost not enjoyable way, because I'm going like I'm watching someone do out loud in front of a room full of strangers what at one point in my life I couldn't even do out loud in front of like my wife. I couldn't do out loud, period. And so immediately it was like it took me back to those feelings. It brought me, it brought up the feelings that I have currently about it, and it also just kind of left me in this place of like, okay, this guy he's not messing around. Like he's going to go somewhere tonight, because I know what he's done up to this point takes a lot of work. Just when he came out and said like, hey, here's the situation with my father, here's the situation with my family, before he even unpacks it, you're like, oh wow, okay, here we go. So yeah, it was like really, I don't want to say like healing to watch, but yeah, I guess maybe healing, but also kind of,
it's cathartic, like, for sure.
Cathartic is a good word to say. It was cathartic and it was difficult. It was uncomfortable.
Yeah. There's a phrase in that I learned in therapy that I love, which is if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And I was like, if you can talk about it, I've had those things too, where I said something out loud for the first time, something I've thought a million times, but I finally said it out loud to somebody that I trust. I've had it with you when we've talked, and like, I just immediately get emotional, because I'm like, that's how I know it's true. Be like, it just, I heard myself say it. A lot of times, that's why talk therapy, I think, can be so effective, because if you're talking about it with somebody, especially in a safe space, you can really start unpacking it. You can really start dissecting it and processing it. And there's that phrase, we're only as sick as our secrets. And, thinking about his story with, it's the theme of his special is secrets. He opens up with like, Jerrod isn't my real name, and I hate my real name. I'm not going to tell you my real name, and I'm not going to talk about my real name because I hate it. And like leading from there to talk about his secret, his deep family secrets going back to his grandparents. And he was like, my real name is a mixture of, my two grandfathers who were giant pieces of shit, essentially, and terrible to the women they were married and their kids, and it just did whatever they wanted. And I have that in my family too. I think a lot of us do, and maybe not everybody, but I think especially what was allowed back in our grandfather's generations and stuff. You look back, you just 2 generations removed from that now. I'm like, it's a lot of that stuff is shocking. A lot of, even the way that, like, I think about the way my grandfather spoke to my grandmother, is just, he would never get away with that now. And he wasn't a bad guy. It's just the way men spoke about and to women is completely different, where we are now,
it's really powerful too. Like what he is doing up there is like, he's breaking a cycle too. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the thing that's so powerful about that. You immediately go like, wow, you are changing the lineage of your family right now, what you're doing. Yeah. There will be a family tree. And up until Jerrod, things went a certain way. And from Jerrod on, that shit was over. And that's really powerful.
Really powerful.
Because like, I think about, I could talk about the things my father has done and that affected our family and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, it's a lot of that's not a secret. I don't even get into the details, but like, he was unfaithful. My parents got divorced. He's remarried now. Beautiful family. Love him. Love my half brother, sister, all that. Like, the family is healed in a lot of ways. But like, it was really painful for a lot of years, and it was going on for a long time. And you look back down his line, and it's like, and I remember like that's something that like my family talks about very openly now and stuff. But hearing that and going like, wow, so like, what was it like for their fathers and for their fathers and for their fathers, and for like, you go back and back and back and back, and you just go like, this has been happening forever. One of the things I remember talking about when we started this podcast was the Andy Griffith metaphor I use. I don't think I've talked about it since episode 0. So like the quick little summation, there's that episode of the Andy Griffith show where Gomer Pyle and Barney Fife are walking down the street. They're cops and they see someone robbing the bank, and they like duck behind this car and they freak out. And one of them, Gomer, turns to Barney and he goes, someone needs to call the cops. It's like, stop this bank robbery. And Barney turns to Gomer and he's like, we are the cops. Like this moment, it's like Jerrod is having that moment, the we are the cops moment on stage of, I have to, no one else is going to teach me how to do this. I wish there was someone I could call to teach me how to be a better man. That is what I'm telling you by sharing my father's shortcomings. I wasn't taught how to do this correctly. And so I don't know, and there's no one to call. Because when you just go back, it's generation after generation after generation after generation, you know? And so we're the cops. At some point, you look around and you're like, it's up to us to just stop whatever is happening right now. And he's doing that on stage, which is like unbelievable because you think through that stuff and you go like, absolutely, my relationship with my father and the stuff that happened in our family, it impacted everything. And not just my relationship with him, but every relationship I've had with every woman, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, absolutely, there were things about me and the way that I was treating people and the way that I saw women and the way that I saw my relationships that I go, that wasn't a class that I signed up for, but it was a lesson that I was inadvertently taught by the men in my life, you know?
Yeah, and we all have those. That's what's so just so resonant with what you said about the breaking the familial trauma, that through line, and that's basically what I've realized, you know. And I can say, knowing you, Dave, like you and I are sitting here right now, we are also doing that. Yeah. Just by virtue of who we are and the work we're doing on ourselves. And just by virtue of like, it's little things too, like having an emotion. Like I am a 40-year-old man who has deep, intimate, vulnerable relationships with other fellow men. And that is a thing that no man in my lineage has ever had, not to this level, to my knowledge. No, yeah. And you know, you can, that alone, like we broke the chains right there, man. It's over. We can pass that down to other generations, even if it's our kids or nieces or nephews or whatever, anybody that's in our line, we'd be like, hey, you can do this. Like, we are showing another way to do it. And I know a lot of men that have been in the film club specifically, this has come up, where it's like, I don't know, I was taught one way how to be a man, and I don't think that that's right anymore. And I don't know what to do. Like what you're just saying, like, I don't know, I don't have anybody to show me how to be a man. So, so I'm going to talk to my fellow male friends about this who also don't know. Maybe we can figure it out together. And that's what's so beautiful about breaking that familial trauma loop. And by that, we mean like passing down the thing that your dad gave to you that he didn't heal, or your parents gave to you. And not saying there were bad parents or bad people, but they just didn't have the tools in the tool belt to take care of themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of that. They knew how to keep a roof over their heads because survival mode was just the way it went. It's just the number one thing, you know? My grandparents who I knew, these are people that I knew, were straight up, not Holocaust survivors, but they were like alive during that time and knew people, you know, and they were Great Depression kids. And like, I don't blame them for not being able to do the work because nobody was at that point. You know, therapy wasn't normalized. All the things that we have now at our fingertips were just not normalized, and they weren't shown how to do it. So they passed on stuff to my parents. They've passed stuff on to me, and it's my job. I feel like maybe my only job on this earth to say, and it stops here, to push back, be the first man to push back and have that energy go all the way through my lineage, my entire. And I don't think it's too much of an overstatement to say that. Like, I've had therapy sessions where I am led through it's not EMDR, which is which is used a lot in therapy sessions, but it's almost like a guided meditation where I went back and into moments. I was guided into moments where I felt like a small person among giants in my life. And the first one that popped in my head, it's like, don't think, just go, was to be in a room. I was 5, 6 years old in a room with my grandfather, who was a tall Eastern European dude who was very stark, very like cold and distant, just didn't like kids, didn't know what to do with them. And he would, like, even the way he hugged me, he was just bony and like, it felt like an assault. And he not a bad guy. I want to say that, like, I think he was doing his best, but he would do this thing where he would just come up to us and he didn't know how to hug us or say he loved us. So he would just like hold up his hand like he was going to pop you, and you would wince, and then he would just kind of laugh and keep walking down the hall. Like that's fucked up. Like for a little kid.
Yeah.
And I was in this room, and I'll tell this story quickly, but like I looked up at him, and he would always take my hat off. I've been wearing ball caps since I was a kid, and he would take my hat off and be like, no, be a man. Don't wear a hat in the house. Like it's rude to wear a hat in the house. Cause I was like a thing, I guess, in the 40s. I don't know. And then he ripped it off me. And in this guided meditation, I looked up at him, and my therapist was like, what's the first thing you want to say to him? What do you want to say to him that you've never said to him? What do you want? What message do you want to send back from current day Nick, who's an adult man, to this man who made you feel fear and scared and like all this stuff? And I looked up at him and I said, I'm going to heal you, motherfucker. That's true.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And my therapist asked me why I talked about, and that just opened up an entire new realm where it's like, I'm going backwards to these people who made me feel small. My dad is a beautiful man. Like he has his own issues and stuff, and him and I do, but he was always super kind and loving. But like my grandparents, all the other great uncles, they always just like were rough and tumble and like didn't know how to just have a conversation without, being a little bit drunk or a little bit rough. And that is just unhealed shit that they didn't know how to deal with. So they covered it up, and a lot of men, that's the way we do it. We're not allowed to be violent. So we watch football games because that's socially sanctioned violence that we're allowed to enjoy. Yeah. It's modern day gladiators. And we all have our versions of that. And I feel like it is important. And I'm talking to the men who are listening to this right now, even women, like if you can stop the perpetual cycle of it's not too late. You can stop that cycle of trauma and not pass it on any further. It can stop where you stop. And I'm a huge proponent of this. So I can talk about it all day long, but that's what you're absolutely right. That's what Jerrod is doing in that moment.
I think it's a good point too. A lot of the stuff you alluded to there with like, I love what you said to your grandfather, great grandfather.
I've never told that story before, by the way.
I love that. I like genuinely love that. But like, because at the same time, I think it's important to point out like Jerrod is on stage and he is airing out his family's stuff.
Yeah, he is.
He really is. Like there's a point where you're watching it where you're like, how are they? He even says at one point, like my mom, he's talking about a separate issue, but like my mom's going to watch this. What's she going to say? I saw an article today. I haven't clicked on it yet, but it said Jerrod speaks out on what how his family felt about Rothaniel, and but I think it's important to say like, hey, like first off, when we say talk about it, we're not saying air out everyone's stuff. Like we're not saying go tell everybody all the secrets. I know we're on a podcast talking about specific things. Jerrod airs everything out, but like find a relationship to talk that out, and preferably therapy. I mean, like friendship is not therapy. Friends are not licensed therapists, so like that's a great start. But like therapy is also a great place. But like find a place to do that. But the other thing is that like there is a probably a better way of going about certain things. But something else is like Jerrod really speaks about his father in the special with a lot of love, and that also stood out to me because there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of fear there still too. But like I love my dad to death now. Like there's no like that there's love in that relationship and everything. But like I think that's an important thing to highlight here is a lot of people could go on, like you could have made this a great comedy special and gone up and told this story in a really angry way, but he doesn't. He comes away from that going like you said earlier, like we were talking about, like it's not an issue of being good parents or bad parents or anything like that. Like, dude, being a person is hard. And when you reach an age where you stop seeing your parents like your parents, it's not mom and dad anymore. It's whoever, John and Sandy or whatever their names are. I couldn't think of two people's names right there for a minute.
Works. That's people's names.
Yeah, John and Sandy. But like you start seeing them as like, oh, like, man, they're people. I'm one of those. And it's ridiculously difficult to be a good one and to do it well, let alone to be one raise one and to, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I don't have kids on purpose. But I think this Rothaniel specifically, to go back to the special, like it's really powerful what he's doing and how he's healing that, but also how he's doing it in a way where he goes like, man, I think I understand it a little bit. You know what I mean? I don't agree with it and I don't want to endorse it, but I think I know how it happened. I think I know how we got there and how I can avoid it.
Yeah. And when he goes into like so he talks about, he's had his own secrets. He's been lying to his family and he comes out as gay, and it really enters this new place of vulnerability, and everything else you could kind of tell, like up until that point, he has unpacked and he has really done a lot of work on, and you can tell that this is fresh. even if it's and it's ongoing, and it doesn't have the safety net of finality,
Yeah.
And even he did SNL, and then he did Seth Meyers, and he talks about it in both of those, kind of like gives us a little bit of an update, like on Seth Meyers specifically, where he's like, I talked to my mom before I got here, and it's a work in progress, and that is just the way this stuff goes too. Like, you have to decide at one point or another how, like, what boundaries you're going to hold with your family, and I feel like he had to make that decision. Like, a lot of people say when people come out that they're so brave. And I think when I was a kid, that was brave because gay people weren't as publicly seen and known as they are now. Right. I feel like in his instance, it's brave because he knows he was giving up how his parents would see him, how his relationship with his brother, just how his family was going to view him. He even talked about how his best friend was like, dude, I feel like you tricked me into having a gay best friend. I wouldn't have signed up for this.
Right.
And that is, at some point, I have been in that moment. I'm not going to say that is my feeling as well, but I have been in a moment where I knew I couldn't stay in a marriage anymore. And a marriage that, like, everybody in my family adored and put on a pedestal. And I had to make a moment where I was like, if I pull the plug on this, if I'm the inciting incident that speaks up first and says, I don't think we should be married anymore, I knew that I was going to be the bad guy. And that kept me in the marriage for a few years longer than it would have. And then finally I was like, whatever's on door number 2 with the question mark on it, I'm going to take that, because that I have to be, especially the more that I got to know myself and really pursue myself as a relationship. I just, the person who was inside me needed to come out. And, like, I don't say that plight is the same as somebody coming out as gay, but it's just speaking your truth, and whatever, letting the chips fall as they may, doesn't mean it's not painful. Doesn't mean it's not, man, I'm so glad I did this, but this is really hard. You could tell, like, he's really struggling with the way his mom sees him, because she's not an outward speaking person. She keeps everything inside. And one of the more poignant moments in it, man, is when he's like, I'm scared of what my mom is how she's gonna act around me and treat me, because I have that in me too. Like, he's like, one of the biggest secrets is that you guys think I'm a nice person, but I can be cold and mean, and
I'm just like my mom.
God, it's so honest, and, like, it's such a beautiful hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is.
It really is incredible. It almost feels, I don't know, this is just hearsay, but it has the feeling that, like, you started to write a special called Rothaniel about the story with your father and the men in your family. And in doing so, you started to kind of evaluate yourself. And it's like the second part of that, of coming out as gay and talking about his relationship with his mother and his brother and his friends and all that kind of stuff, almost feels like I was just trying to tell this other story over here that was really honest. But in the process of being honest, I realized I wasn't being honest with myself over here. And so, like, this part, I wasn't really ready to share, almost, like, because it's not, the story isn't finished. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of, like, resolution in those relationships. Like you said, he's talking, not a spoiler for the special, but, like, he's talking on Seth Meyers promoting it, saying, like, I talked to her on the way here, and how is it? Work in progress.
Yeah.
Like, things don't sound great still. It's not like her mom, like, his mom is just an open ally to the gay community and his lifestyle and all that other kind of stuff. But there's love there, just the same way that, like, he still isn't happy about some of the things that happen with his father and the way he feels complicit there. But there's love there, and they're, like, working through that. And so to present an unfinished story, Mike Birbiglia's specials are incredible, and they're vulnerable, and there are so many of they're so close to this in so many ways, but he tells you finished stories. Where, like, he gives you an ending at the end where you go, oh man, all this happened, but it's okay because, and he leaves you with this great feeling. This didn't really, it did leave you with a feeling of hope, because he is a hopeful guy, but it didn't leave you with a sense of resolution of, oh, thank God everything works out for him.
You know what does it though? It didn't leave me cold and empty and like, oh, what?
No, not at all.
But the reason that didn't is because, going back to that Patton Oswalt story I told earlier, the audience has him in their hands. The audience followed him there. There are several moments where different people in the crowd speak to him and not heckle, but just like ask him really like love-filled questions that maybe he hadn't thought of yet. And I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a couple beautiful moments where the audience really has him in their hands, and it doesn't feel like pandering. It feels like they're there to challenge him too, because there's a couple things that he says that they're like, they're like, I don't know about that as a crowd or whatever. He's like, oh, okay, I'm going to lose you.
He loses them a couple times. Not loses them, but they disagree with him.
There's some tension there, which is beautiful. I love the tension, but I really do feel like, and he says like, I have really good people in my life. I have really good people around me. And I feel like his audience is that it feels like he is talking to us, the audience, as a friend. And that is a thing that I have never seen in a stand-up special before. It is wholly unique to this thing, where it feels like he was telling some funny stories at dinner, and then the table got serious because he's still working through some stuff. And there's moments, long pauses that could have been edited out. And I'm so glad that Bourbonum left them in, man, because long pauses of just him processing, and you could see and he gets to this point where he almost like crumbles into a ball. And like, I've never felt so strongly that I want to reach through a screen and hug somebody than when I was watching it, dude.
It's interesting too, though, because I agree with everything you said. And
okay,
like
the last, we're gonna wrap up then. No, continue.
The last 15 minutes of this special really are like a family conversation. He sets it up and says like, if we're not family, this doesn't work, right? So it's like, and he doesn't seem bothered by the questions. It's a really, honestly, they were questions I was asking myself, but at the same time, those silences were so incredible because you're just going, every single time there really were these long pauses, and I could not look away though. Like, he pauses for a long time, and you don't just go like, okay, dude, I get what you're doing for dramatic effect or for like,
you don't get your phone
really
out.
Going,
you're just like,
no, I really see him going like, I don't know where he's gonna go, because I feel like he is not sure, like he's on this journey right now. And so there was a part of me, as much as I loved those questions and I had the same ones and it played out really beautifully, where I go like, will y'all shut up? I wanted to see where he was going to go with this, because I almost feel like there were moments where he had backed himself into a corner in how much he shared, and that this could just be a great performance, and this was how it was written, right? But like, it feels that way, and like he's being quiet, going like, no, I don't think so either. But like, it feels like he was really genuinely going like, this is bringing up these feelings. Where do I go now? Where do I go from here? What do I say next? And I kind of wanted to know what he would do before they asked that. At the same time, like, the questions are perfect. You know, it really isn't. It's not a heckle, but
no, like, I feel like he would have said, like, I would, if somebody asked a question or whatever, I feel like he would have said, like, hang on, before I get to that, let me tell you, it felt like he really genuinely was kind of putting feelers out there. Like, if anybody wants to say anything, now would be the time to do it. But I love it because he's never interrupted. Like, nobody interrupts him. It is in those pregnant pauses that they just, and it's not a like, hey yo, it's just like, you're talking to me right now. Like,
tell us a joke. Yeah, it's none of that. They're literally, it's like,
you know,
it's a conversation. They say something like, I mean, like we're having right now, like, it say something, there's a long pause. Well, how do you think, blah, blah. Well, if they this, then do you think you would? And it was like, wow, okay, this is like, we're in the room, you know. It was powerful.
It really is. It's such a unique special. It's on HBO Max. I don't know if we've talked about that yet, but this is worth getting HBO Max if you don't have it.
100%.
But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight as we're going along here?
Sorry, I laugh because like, yes, but no. Because like, I'd like, no, not on that episode, not on that note. Like, it's a beautiful deal. I think we've unpacked a whole lot there.
I feel like we could just be like, you want to have a dad episode? Because I have more shit to say about my secrets and dads. Me. And I'm like, what do I share right now about that? But
yeah. We're men who are trying to be vulnerable, so like, there's going to be a lot of dad episodes.
A lot of dad episodes.
There'll be no shortage of that.
Thank God that there are a lot of artists who have issues with their dads, and they've made the movies, and we get so we can have those conversations. But this honestly, Rothaniel is such a beautiful example of exactly why I wanted to start this podcast with you, and like, because anytime I'm like, oh, these themes are so rich, I want to like talk to you and encourage other people to write in and kind of talk to us, or have conversations like you were saying, like find your safe people. If you don't have a spouse or a significant other to share this stuff with, like, and you don't feel like you can go to your family because it's about them, like find a therapist that you like, but also like, seek out other male friends who might understand. Like really seek that out. Find your safe people, even if it's an Uber driver. Like sometimes that helps. Like I've had some really deep conversations with Uber drivers, but honestly, like if you have stuff, don't be afraid to, in whatever way you can, I would encourage people to get it out. I'm a big proponent of writing, whether I'm a songwriter, but I do three morning pages a day where I just journal, where I just mind dump. And that I've talked about it a lot in the last few years, but especially during COVID, that has helped me sort through a lot of stuff. And it also just helps get it out there and look at like my physical words, like thoughts that I had, and just seeing them in physical form does something for your brain where it like validates them and makes it feel like you're not going crazy because you just have these thoughts swirling around. And men, we are taught to just keep everything in, push it down. And I feel like we're just now getting to the point where like, what if we put it the other way and we let it out?
Yeah.
And that's one of many things we want to encourage here on this podcast.
Yeah. I encourage people to figure out how you process stuff. I don't think I realized I was a verbal processor to the extent that I am until you and I reconnected literally this month last year. Like a year to the date almost.
Yeah, it is,
where like Nick just reached out to Marco Polo, was like, hey dude, and gave me this long spiel about like how, hey, we're not really close friends, but I feel like we could be and should be, and you seem like me, like maybe you don't have a lot of really, really, really close friends that like you like, and I'd like to pursue that with you if you want. And it was like, heck yes, I want to do but I realized over this course of the year, I don't say things to you that I've never thought before.
Yeah.
I just like, and especially Marco Polo has almost turned into like a journal or therapy, because you're looking at yourself when you're recording, you just see yourself. So you're not even looking at another person. And there's been so much, the amount that I've grown genuinely, like just how different my life is today than it was last April.
Me too, man.
It's insane. And I really do believe that's because of that. I learned I was a verbal processor. I'm saying things out loud and going like, oh wow, and I'm finding someone that I can do that with, like in this safe space. It's huge.
This relationship is 100% been the exact same thing for me too. And like I just reached out because I had an inkling. I was like, man, every time I hang out with Dave, it's the best. It's way too short. I feel like we just scratched the surface, and it's usually revolving around some concert, and those are fun, but like I would really love like an entire evening of just picking your brain and hearing your story and sharing laughs and quoting Paul Rudd movies and stuff.
We had a high fidelity friendship where we just talked about the stuff we loved.
It's so true. Yeah,
genuinely, yeah.
And So there's not too much. I mean, there's so much more to say about that. We don't have enough time on this. It's a good thing we have more episodes of this podcast to record.
I'll say this one shout out. I just completely off topic. I thought about it earlier and there was no way to get back to it. But one more recommendation for people before we like close out and you give the quote and all that. Paul Provenza in The Green Room. He had an old show called In the Green Room. Was that called? I think it was just called The Green Room.
Yeah.
And it was literally like him, and he'd get a bunch of comics together, and they would sit around in a circle and just talk like they would in the green room, supposedly. But season 2, episode 1 is Jeff Ross, Gary Shandling, Ray Romano, Mark Maron, Bo Burnham, and Judd Apatow. Like it is when you just want to talk about like guys who sit around and talk about like comedy and writing and like why do we do this and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That is like so many of the people that we've referenced on this. We didn't reference Judd on this episode as much, but like he is because he gets 90% of every other episode. But like that, it literally felt like, oh, someone asked Dave like, hey, who do you want on this episode? And I'd be like, yeah, Judd Apatow, Bo Burnham, and Mark Maron. Like, please, just as long as you can fill them out with whoever the rest of the episode is, which the other guys are great, but with those 3 I was like, what? Yeah, what is going to happen there? And it's incredible.
It is amazing. Yeah, and it feels like it kind of fits into like the roundtable podcast space, but it's 100%. It's a TV show. But yeah.
All right. Well, you're going to take us out with a movie quote in a minute here.
Yeah.
Follow us on social media, Betterman Film Club on Instagram, at Betterman Pod on Twitter. He's Nick Flora everywhere. I am Dave Wears Black everywhere. Last week's quote, what did I say? Searching for a boy in high school is as pointless as searching for a meaning in a Pauly Shore movie.
Is from Clueless.
The incomparable Cher Horowitz. Little gender bender. I've been wanting to fit that in somewhere, and the High Fidelity episode was so douche bro that was like, let's get some,
for sure,
some women voices in here.
Well, this week, and we'll end on this, the quote is, "Screws fall out all the time. The world's an imperfect place." That's it.
What is that? Dude, I should have known that. A brief little history on comedy nerdage.
We talked so much, and I still feel like there's stuff that I want to say.